We left $86 billion worth of equipment and weaponry in Afghanistan.
Why?
Because they're
What's
cowards.
the reason? Like, you can withdraw, but it just takes time.
Look, there's more to that story that I think is going to come out if Donald Trump is elected president.
So there's a reason, on purpose.
Absolutely.
There's no way they just call somebody and get out.
If let's just look at it like a game, like a puzzle game, right? If I told you, give me the motive, right? Just like a murder. When someone's murdered, we're going to look for who's going to benefit the most from this. Well, let's look at what happened. $86 billion worth of equipment and weapons. Those weapons spread throughout the world. Some of those weapons, by the way, showed up October 7th in Israel. Hamas was using them to murder people. Monetarily, you know who, of course the Americans all pulled out and ran away. You know who did not? The Russians and the Chinese. In fact, they built bigger embassies. They stayed there.
In Afghanistan.
They signed mineral deals and resources. So they stood to benefit greatly. You telling me you don't think that Russian intelligence, FSB, and Chinese intelligence were in that airport looking at our equipment and facilities like immediately? You telling me you don't think that they were helping the Taliban come back in? Here's what happened. Because remember, for our listeners here, I worked for the State Department, right? So on the ground for the State Department's goal is primarily American citizens. The security personnel, we were called RSOs. In the States, we're special agents. If you're at an embassy somewhere else, you're called a regional security officer, right? So there's a bunch of RSOs and ARSOs, assistant RSOs. So I've talked with these guys. I'm pretty close to some of them who were there on the ground. Very close, actually. So this is all firsthand account. And I was back here on the civilian side helping coordinate getting people out. That's how bad the government failed. That I was already gone from the State Department, working in the U.S., and I was getting phone calls from people in D.C. saying, can you help us because there's American citizens that are stuck there and they can't get out. And so I was using my connections and calling people. I think in total we got 38 people out. Between me sending visas and passports and photos, talking to people on WhatsApp and Signal, and then coordinating with government guys that I knew on the ground to get them out. Because Joe Biden abandoned them, like completely just was like, goodbye. It was a disaster. The first thing that went down, I noticed, the Air Force left. And that was a big strategy sign. This is why a general should have been fired for this. Everybody who knew anything about the global war on terror knew that one of our great advantages is air superiority. Yes. It's very difficult for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and these guys, right, to crawl out of their caves and come kill Americans if you have an F-22 or a drone in the sky, right, or a C-130 gunship. So the fact that the Air Force left was a big shock. And I mean, this is how shocking it was. I was on the phone with someone there, and he was like, I don't know what's happening. All the planes are leaving. They didn't even tell the other Americans. So the Air Force, gone. Troops start leaving. Then all communications got shut down, everything. There was no comms from American citizens able to reach the State Department. And I thought that was weird. And again, because I had contact with people, I was talking to people going, why is the State Department site down? Why are the phone lines down? And he's like, oh, dude, they shut everything off. So I'm calling people's cell phones personally, right? So this was a very on purpose withdrawal. Basically, Joe Biden, right, woke up from an afternoon nap and was like, like he gets all angry when he yells at people. He basically was like, get everybody out of Afghanistan. There must have been people around him going, sir, a lot of people are going to die if you do this. I don't care. I'm trying to win an election. That's all he did it for. He sacrificed thousands of people's lives, including 13 U.S. Marines, dead because he wants to win another election. That's how disgusting his politics are. The general should have been fired immediately, right? Obviously Joe Biden's to blame. I think it's treasonous. That's my personal opinion. But, the Supreme Court just said that presidential actions while in office are immune. So I'm sure Biden knows that as well. But the other thing that happened was there were thousands of American citizens there, civilians, right? Afghans, many of whom, by the way, they earned their right to be U.S. citizens very deservedly because they helped Americans over the last 20 years. A lot of those families were interpreters. They were, coalition guys that helped us early on, and they had since moved to America. One family I helped, they're back east. They were back in Kabul visiting for a wedding. They're all American citizens. And the Biden administration was like,
At the time of withdrawal.
oh yeah, there was thousands of American citizens that were just visiting. You know why they were visiting? Because when the Americans were in charge, it was a great place. You could go anywhere in Kabul. The Taliban was on the run. They didn't control anything. Do you know that the casualty rate, I think like that year, like one American soldier died and it was an accident. We were in total control. Here's my personal opinion. People are going to differ on this, but this is me speaking, right? I don't think that we should have ever left. Not for another 70 years. That's my opinion. I think we were in a very good geopolitical position. We were finally giving the people of Afghanistan the opportunity to generationally grow out of that Islamic warrior mindset, tribe mindset, and actually have a free democracy. There were kids there actually going to school, girls who didn't have to cover their face or be burned with acid. They're going to college and university. We were building roads and schools. We did the same thing in Germany. We're still in Germany. Japan, the brutal Japanese empire that committed all kinds of horrible atrocities during the 1940s, are some of our best friends now. So why were they in such a hurry to leave? Again, if you look at it from the perspective of an investigation, our enemies benefited the most from that, especially the Chinese Communist Party.
And the Russians have some deals with Taliban right now.
Absolutely.
Putin is with Taliban.
Absolutely.
All the time.
Yeah. They're going to go in on the BRICS deal, not to mention natural resources, training, the position, like where Afghanistan is located. You don't think Putin and the Chinese are happy that there's no more Americans there? Joe Biden betrayed the United States in that withdrawal. He abandoned, not only did he abandon Americans and Americans were killed, think about what this does to us and our reputation around the world. Who wants to be our friend now? We had allies there who trusted us. We had Afghans who were warriors, good fighters, who fought alongside us and died in that conflict to defeat that terrorism and establish this American dream that we said, hey, anybody can do it. It's possible. And Joe Biden just abandoned them. See ya. We knew. I was on the phone talking to people. I'll give you one circumstance without saying names. I'm on the phone with a young man. He's an American citizen. He's in a suburb of Kabul in downtown in a house. I'm talking to him on the phone because he's panicking. He said, I tried to go to the airport. The Taliban has checkpoints and they're beating people with sticks, not letting them in. And I'm like, he's trying to figure out what to do. I'm looking at a schematic of a map and I'm trying to coordinate his location to some government people back at the airport, right? While I'm talking to him, he goes, hold on, the Taliban's coming. And he kind of goes quiet and I'm like, hey, stay on the line with me. And I guide him. I'm looking at a sat image of where he's at. And I'm telling him, like, he's asking me, I'm telling him the name of the streets and kind of telling him, go out the back door and go this way. The Taliban was going door to door throughout all the neighborhoods, looking for people who had firearms and guns, confiscating them. And anyone who they deemed had worked for the government or with the Americans, they were putting them on list and they were executing them. Like on the spot, hunting people down and murdering them. And so this kid who is a family member of someone who worked with U.S. forces, he's from back east in the States visiting. And he's like in panic that like his government has completely abandoned him. Anyways, long story short, he gets out the back, right? End up disconnecting. He calls me back a little while later and, says that he's alive. We end up getting them to a British compound because the Americans wouldn't let anybody near, or they couldn't, or the Taliban wouldn't let people near, right? Every time he would try to approach one of the gates or points, we tried to get him in Abbey Gate before the suicide vest went off, and the Taliban would be shooting over tops of people's heads. And then if you turn around and try to go the other way, the Afghan intelligence were shooting at people, like 50 cals over the tops of their heads, because they didn't know who was, American citizen or terrorist or whatever. Absolute chaos. We ended up getting him and his family into a British base. I believe it was Barron was the name of the operating base. And from there, I talked to a British army lieutenant, who gets on the phone. He's like, who are you? And I'm like, I don't have time to go into this, but I got these people here. They're Americans. They have blue books. I'm having someone from the airport. They're trying to get to you. And so we coordinated a convoy, picked them up, and they got him back to the airport. And then I next heard from him. He was in Doha, so he got out of the country. But unfortunately, thousands of people did not get out of the country. And it's a betrayal of such a disastrous proportion that the mainstream media has been silent about it. It is the biggest disaster I've ever seen in my life from the government. An utterly disgraceful, treasonous act.
Only this footage of that plane alone explains everything. When people just hang on the doors when the plane takes off, that's like in a movie. That's that's horror.
You think those people who died clinging onto the wheels of the plane wanted the Americans to leave? No. The only people that wanted the Americans to leave were the Democrats, the Chinese Communist Party, and the Russians. Now, I'm going to go a little deeper.
Maybe the Iranians.
Yeah, definitely the Iranians. Let's go a little deeper and realize, and like maybe back up and ask yourself, if you were a detective, okay, and you're investigating this case, I see the motive, I see the crime. Now I would ask myself, what's behind Joe Biden and this push to do this? Okay, now we get into the Hunter laptop story, where you see that the Biden family has been on the Chinese Communist payroll for many years, tens of millions of dollars paid to Hunter Biden, right? We have phone conversations between the person they identified as Chow and Hunter, where he's saying, I'm sitting in the office right now with my father. Mm-hmm. You better do what I'm telling you to do, right? There's a clear and long relationship between the Chinese Communist Party and the Biden family. Now, anybody who's ever worked, I don't care what country you're in, if you ever worked around the intelligence services or had a clearance, you would know that's a compromise. They're not doing the Bidens favor. They may think that, but you tell me, what kind of government agency pays politicians of another country? Is it the Department of Energy? No, it's the intelligence services. The Biden family has been on the payroll of Chinese intelligence. I guarantee it. And I think a lot of this stuff is going to come out, and they have evidence and they have proof of it. And the Democrats are panicking because Joe Biden is basically Alzheimer's zombie. And you got his brother and you have Hunter, right? So you have a lot of people that are going to be exposed. The Democrats have, because of their stupid anti-American ideology, are the perfect targets for Chinese intelligence and Russians because they're exploitable. They're easy to manipulate because they already hate their country. It's
but
perfect.
You've been a politician for 50 years. You've been a vice president. Now you became a president. Why would you sell out?
Money.
How much?
Millions and millions of dollars. I mean, I have to go back. I did a special.
Do you think he didn't have those millions?
Not as much, no. I did a special called Treason in the House. It's a 2-part on the laptop series. I have it up on YouTube. It's really interesting.
I'm going to put the link in the description.
I went through all the details that came out about like the laptop detail, and like I basically looked at the evidence, and then I gave my perspective as like a former federal investigator on like what that would mean to me. And for anybody with common sense, it screams espionage. It screams like they're obviously on the payroll, because nobody in a Chinese energy company pays you $10 million without getting something from it. What's my benefit, right? And that's what like the mainstream media refuses to investigate or ask. Like, why would Chinese Communist Party officials be paying Hunter Biden? For what? For crack? Millions and millions of dollars. They're all making millions of dollars on this.